And welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. Today, you are with your host, Crystal Fleming, also known as Crystal McCarrington. And today, we have a vivacious, an outstanding writer who is going to blow our minds when it comes to magic, fantasy, and all things. So, before we jump in with her, I have, the routine. I got an advert here from Marianne Curley for her Time Guardian book series, and this is for book 4, The Shadow. The battle is over, the war is won, the prophecy complete, but life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan. Struggling to cope with tragic loss, at odds with the friends and the guard, he finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Lathina's death, Giselle swears revenge to nullify the Immortals' plan for world domination. But Giselle hadn't planned on love. And that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart or the strings of a goddess short on praise but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the Guard and the Order battle through the past and into the impossible future, darkness lurks around every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with just one. Is it friend or foe who stands in the shadow? And just a reminder that The Price of Freedom by Rosemary Rowan is having most of her royalties donated to the Ukraine refugee crisis, and her agent has donated her commission to that as well. So please, everyone, if you have a couple of pounds, please go over to your local bookstore or onto your local book buying platform and pick up The Price of Freedom by Rosemary Rowan to help support the crisis in Ukraine. And that is one of her Roman British crime series novels. Now, my favorite part when I get to talk books and magic and everything juicy. I love juice. Let's welcome in Francesca May. I'm just glad I said that.
Thank you so much for having me. You did, yes.
I'm terrible. I've had authors that come on and I thought I was going to say their name right, and I practiced 100 times, and then my accent means that I totally butcher it, and it's like, oh, no. It's American names.
Fine.
Every American name I get screwed. So I don't know why. But I saw your book. I can't remember where it was now, but somebody turned me over to you and said, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I went, "No, what's this about?" And they were like, "No, seriously, you gotta see this book coming out." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." And I looked you up, and I loved the fact you grew up in the middle of England, because
yeah.
Brit power here,
Yeah.
Brit power. And then it was like, she kills houseplants like me, so like even more connection power here. And then you love Gothic mansions, witchcraft and queer love, and that was just me. I was like, sold,
all
people,
of those things,
sold. Yeah, but I mean, Brit power. British people write the best stuff. That's what I say.
Oh, completely agree. Completely agree.
Because, like, I keep saying, like I was saying this yesterday, British people, we go for originality. We don't try and think of ways to, like, take a book and just rewrite it in our own sort of viewpoint. We love originality, and we really kind of respect that, and that's drummed into us by our English teachers. But also, not only that, we've got eye for detail. We are very good at just researching our stuff, so it feels kind of legit. When you're reading it, it feels realistic. It feels like it could happen. And nobody could turn around and say, well, you didn't research this. Like, I feel like we come in with that kind of perspective on things, and I love that. So you gotta tell me about this book, because everyone's telling me it's gonna be the book of the year. So do you want to fill us in a little bit on this Wild and Wicked Things?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wild and Wicked Things is a sapphic reimagining of The Great Gatsby, but with witches. So you've got the 1920s setting. You have a main character who is summoned to a mysterious island off the coast of England during a magical prohibition. And what she finds there is a very rich next door neighbor who is known for throwing these very large, very rambunctious parties. And her neighbor is also rumored to be a witch. And Annie finds herself pulled into this world of
Ooh,
blood bargains and dark magic in the sort of very heady 1920s post World War setting.
I love that, and I just to be honest with you, I adore the cover.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my
there's
goodness.
a lot of books at the moment. Yeah, there's like so many books at the moment that come out and the covers just suck. But the book is really good, and then you look at the cover and you're like, really? Like, who is in charge of this idea? Like,
Orbit have the
but I
best
love it
covers.
because
They
I
are.
look at yours and it's, yeah, yours looks like a book I would expect to be coming out of like Fairy Loot. It is that level
Mm,
of ooh,
it is beautiful.
ooh, I
Lisa,
found the
who
perfect
designs the
one here.
covers, is just amazing. Honestly, she's so good, and like a lot of the Orbit covers are just beautiful. So I remember saying, if it was black and gold, I would die happy, and if it was witchy and jazz agey, I would die happy, and it is all of those things in one.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so great when they actually like take in what you think and like, put
Yeah,
what you
absolutely.
feel the book is into it. Yeah. There's a lot of publishers that just don't do that, and I think it's kind of criminal to the poor authors that like we're the ones that sit for like what, a year, sometimes 9 months with this thing,
Yeah,
and we're
slaving
like
over it.
crying and fighting with it and giving, it's like giving birth.
I've
Let's be fair,
I've
it's
had
like
different
giving birth.
experiences. Sometimes, publishers will give you a lot of input and sometimes they won't. And, guaranteed, like a lot of the time they know better because they're designers and we're not. But equally, it's so nice when
Yeah,
they listen to elements that we really do want on the cover. I remember Orbit asked me for like a Pinterest board, um, with kind of
yeah,
elements and themes that I wanted on the cover. So that was really, really nice. And to see what popped up, it was amazing.
yeah, I love that. Like I had a cover artist, she was amazing. Like what she was able to do for me, I would go back to her 100% over and over again. And I sometimes still do, actually, if I decide to read release a book or whatever. But she would like, because my book had wrestlers in it, but I didn't want it to be off-putting to the romance industry, so I had her make it pink with like the wrestlers and the girl and just adding all those elements. And people were like, "We really love the cover, but we have no idea what the book is about." And I'm like, kind of the point. I want you to
That's
pick
why
it
I
up
did
and not know this is a sports romance, you know?
it.
Um, and it's great. Yeah. And I love meeting other people that kind of like to twist themes and go with like slightly different kind of ideas. Because I kind of rivaled against, well, I've rebelled against the Marvel world, and I actually kind of did a story with Norse gods and mythology in it. Real
Amazing.
mythology, not the stuff that Marvel spits out, but stuff that
Yeah,
I grew
the
up
real
with and
stuff.
I'd listened to. And it was like a myth that we were kind of, there was this idea that was implanted in us as kids that we didn't, some of us didn't go out trick or treating because A, it was seen as begging, and B, it was the night that the Norse gods could be free and could walk the world. And my mother was kind of convinced that this was a good way of keeping me from going around to houses. And yeah, so I know I like it when people rebel, like against the sort of bigger kind of ideas and companies, and I think I just love your idea. I
Oh, thank
cannot
you.
wait to review it. It will definitely be on my TBR. My husband is starting to look at my TBR pile and think, Crystal, if that book's pile leans any further and it falls over, we're gonna get murdered in the middle of the night
But what
by
better way
your
to go?
library. Yeah, exactly. I said to him, like, we're starting a family this year. And I was like, he's like, well, what do you want to leave the kids? And I'm like, I'm leaving my kids, my library.
The books,
like,
obviously.
This is a labor of love. Like, he's like, Crystal, you're over 1,000 books. I don't care. Every
So far.
book in that stack. Yeah, so far. He does not know that there's like at least 30 books coming from different publishers. Because it's been great since I started the podcast. Like, people are sending me stuff that I would never otherwise try. And I'm like doing all these interviews with different people. And as I say to you, I'm recording sometimes twice a day or 3 times a day. And it's funny because he's gonna literally see that pile keep growing, because these publishers are gonna send these books so that I interview people. And yeah, so I reckon by the time like my kid's 18, 20, I will probably be about 5,000 books in.
Love it. That's possibly a good number of books.
But I kind of hope I have a house big enough for it by then. So yeah. Because I was saying to Ian, I'm like, the size of the house is really important, not because of our family or anything. It's because, the books.
The books.
I need places to put the books. Yeah, and he laughs at me. He's like, seriously, Crystal? I don't know. I don't need to ask you what to buy you for Christmas. It's simple. Bookcase.
Just
every time.
Books. Oh, book vouchers.
Yeah, that's what I said to him. I'm like, books. Easiest person to buy for. I say to him, though, if you're going to buy me a book, let me send you a list.
Yeah, choose
because
otherwise.
Yeah, if you don't have the list, you always go and buy me a duplicate of what I already have. So I'm like, please let me just send you like my to buy list, And he's like, because even all my in-laws tease me about it, my parents tease me about it. But I think that's a pretty damn good thing to leave people, like a legacy of books. My kids could they might love reading, they might not, but at least they're getting something that, maybe they can auction off and sell one day. I have a lot of signed copies of things.
Books are full of memories, aren't they? So
yeah. And I've got enough, I've got a children's section as well. I've got sections, right?
Yeah, me too.
I got very young children's, with fairy tales and children's books, and then I got the next one up, which is what I call preteen, so Harry Potter and those kind of books, and then I got teen YA, then adult, and then there's the crime and stuff like that. But my husband actually donated his books recently to charity that I bought him for Christmas over the years, and it was so sad. But I can't say anything because they're his, so I'm sitting on my hands, trying really hard not to say or do anything, and I'm like, no. But at least I know sad. Because they're donated to charity, they'll at least get read by somebody else,
Yeah, that's true.
But I buy him books, and he'll either read them or he'll go, no, I'm not interested, and then they just sit in a pile. Because I bought him the brand new hardback J. Kristoff book, the vampire one.
Oh yeah, the Empire Vampire, yeah.
Yeah, the one that looks like, if you hit somebody with it, you could probably do them in.
Yeah, definite brain damage.
And yeah, and he read 10 pages. I don't even think it was more than 10 pages. And he's like, I don't get this, and I'm pretty bored. And I'm like, how can you be bored? It's J. Kristoff, for goodness sake. So I'll probably end up reading it. It'll probably become my book in my stack.
It'll be on your TBR
I'm letting him donate that. It's a hardback. It's a really good hardback version. Dude, seriously. So do you have that trouble too? Do you have the woes of being a writer?
Well, yes, I'm also a bookseller, so it's triply bad. I think. I think I had something 600 or 700 books before I started bookselling. A large portion of which I've not read. And that was 7 years ago, and I have not counted my books since because I am embarrassed to know the number, so we just don't count them. And I had to move all of my books out of my study recently because we're renovating it. And my mom said to me, "Do you want a hand?" And I was like, "No, it's fine. I'm a bookseller. I move books all day. It's my job. I know what I'm doing." And then 9 hours later of moving these books, I was thinking to myself, maybe I overshot. Maybe I have more books than I realized. So yeah, definite problem. I've got so many books on the go.
I was I got a job in Shetland as a relief support worker. So I was staying in Hamilton in Scotland, and my husband was like, "Okay, I'll pack up the house, you go to Shetland, start your job, it'll be fine." And then I get a phone call 2 days later. He had like a month. Like we only had no, it was like 2 weeks or something until he came up. And I got a call 2 days later, and he's like, "I hate you." It's like, okay, why? And he's like, the spare room from floor to ceiling is boxes. And 90% of that boxes is your books. He says, I don't think your dad's hired a van big enough. I was like, oh dear. Not good.
I dread the day.
So
I ever
yeah,
move
he
house.
he FaceTimed me, and it was like, yeah, the whole room, floor to ceiling. He could not even get in the door.
Oops.
I felt so bad. But it has,
But not that
because
bad.
like I hadn't realized over the years, because I'd stashed it under the bed. I think that's a favorite for us bookers, is we stash books under the bed. And I had them built up around the book, like the bedside table, and that was stacked in importance to reading.
Yeah.
Right. And then I had the bookcases, which was in the hall, the living room, and 3 in the spare room. Those were pinned. And then he found my secret stash in the bathroom. Because you'd have to have a book in the bath, right? So I had a cabinet under the sink, and I would just grab a book from there if I forgot one. So I always had like books everywhere. And yeah, so now he kind of looks, I've got this like hexagon bookshelf, and he's looking at it, and it's pretty full. Well, almost full actually. And he's like, have you got books hidden elsewhere in the house, Crystal? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I don't want to know. He says, when we move your books and all them up. And I'm like, damn it. Oh, well.
The worst
I
part
also
of
got
moving.
2 cats. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Worst part of moving. And I do have to move soon because, as I said, we're trying for a baby. And our spare room's more like we have 2 bedrooms, a flat, and our second room is more like a closet than it is a bedroom. I don't really think.
Yeah.
Like, we can get a blow-up bed in there, like a queen blow-up bed, but you can't, like, walk down either side of it. It just, like, wall to wall. So, like, Ian's like, there's no way we're getting a crib and all that crap in here. It's just not going to work, so we're going to have to move. So, yeah, I find it slightly funny.
Alarming.
Like, I swear I'll probably hide books under my kid's crib or something. There'll be just, like, books holding up the crib.
There'll be books everywhere. Everywhere.
Good stabilizer, though.
Very true. Very true. As long as you get ones that are the right same height.
Yeah. But I love the fact that you're a bookseller, because for me, like, if I couldn't write and be a stay-at-home writer and actually like write all the time, I wanted to either work in a library, which I think is every reader's dream, or I wanted to work in a bookshop. The bookshop said they wouldn't hire an author because it would be a distraction. So I didn't get hired by my local bookstore.
That's crazy.
I nearly got the job as a library. So.
Oh, amazing! See, most of the booksellers I know, like I would say, a good portion of them are writers. Like a lot of them are. And there's a running joke, because I work for Waterstones, and there's a running joke that like there is a Waterstones to writing pipeline, because there are so many booksellers that go on to become authors. So
yeah, and it's crazy because I look on it in a way, because I did these huge tour, like I did a huge tour with Waterstones and Austin Macaulay Publishing, and I felt so bad for the booksellers, because my books for these signings were turning up 3 minutes before the signing, like 3 minutes, right? And they had given them no marketing stuff. They had given them no like banners, no marketing stuff to put up, no posters, nothing. And then and I would come and I would like have to be like a car salesman. I would have to stand in the shop after signing all the books and then try and sort of sell them.
Try and sell them to people.
Yeah, and I mean, I was lucky. I managed to sell out every shop I was in because I did Durham, I did Livingston, Stirling, Carlisle. There's another place in England I did. It's not coming to me right now. Durham's my favorite because I sold out within an hour. I did 12 copies in an hour.
That's very good.
Yeah, so like, but I've not had a mainstream contract since then. I actually had to leave Austin Macaulay because I found out, well, one, they didn't pay my fuel bill to go around the shops. Two, they forgot to pay the visa for Joe to come over. So I was having to apologize to all these fans and readers that did show up for them. And then, like, three, they were not willing to put out the second book, despite the fact that whenever we did book tours and signings, we sold out everywhere we went. So, I mean, I managed to sell out in LA, which is the hardest place to sell. Like, they had bought 6 copies, and I sold 6 copies. I sold copies in America because they're like in New York. It was New York. Yeah, all wrestling fans are in New York. At least it feels like that. And they just like as soon as they found out there's like these copies of the book, they were gone. So yeah, it was a bit sad that they wouldn't continue the series, and we could never really kind of get on that. But I always said if I get a mainstream contract again, I'll definitely do every Waterstones that would have me.
Absolutely.
And the weird thing was, I did it all myself too. I phoned up all the booksellers and was like, "Hey, do you want me to stop by, do a reading or a signing or whatever you want?" And I think they were slightly taken aback by that, to be honest. Like, oh,
it's funny because
yeah,
now we've definitely
sure,
like moved that way. I think it's really common now for that, like for authors to get in touch as you know, as often as publicists do. I know I for one, like just if I'm out and about and I know that they've got copies of my book, I'll just stop by and be like, "Hey, can I sign them?" And the booksellers are always really lovely. It's really nice. I was in London in May and I popped in and signed some books that they had on the table, which was really nice.
I love that, and like, I hated the way that like Austin was literally. They turned to me and they said, "Oh, because you signed all the books, we couldn't return. Like they couldn't return them." And I was like, "But you never told me not to sign them all."
Yeah, that's something they should be upfront about.
Here. Yeah, and then I was just like, well, if the store didn't want me to sign them all, they should have just told me that. Like, yeah, that was like the only thing I didn't like. So I like if I did sign a copy, I was always like trying to make sure that there was going to be somebody to buy it after that. But I love doing Waterstone tours. It's my favorite because I like talk to the bookseller. Like I'll get a cup of coffee and I'll go there early and I'll be like, "Hey, do you want to just sit down for 5 minutes and we'll just like talk books?" So yeah, and it's weird because I actually managed to do that with Debbie Hartness. I turned her signing in Glasgow into a lot of fun, she said, because like she thought she was just going to get the typical answers, like the typical questions about the series from her readers, and then I stand up and I have these writing questions, and then she just like clicks, there's the writer, and then her assistant went and Googled me, saw what my name like, figured out that I was like the writer of Carla, and then she kind of like slipped a little bit of the info to Deborah. We ended up talking about Carla at the signing table. And it was so sad because I never managed to get Carla into Waterstones. But that was like my dream, was to get Carla into Waterstones. And she was like, damn, she's like, I totally love to sit at a table with you and talk fantasy all night. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that.
Amazing.
I've actually been invited to a few tables now. Round tables now for that, so
I love it.
But yeah, you should check out, we just released Sarah Humphreys was on, and she is a New York bestseller. She does adult fantasy, and she actually stepped away, and she's also a manager working for a care home, sort of like community care home area. But she's getting back into writing because she's got more time now. But Yeah, so she's doing that, and her books, like, you've got so many different elements. It's like an onion. The more you read it, the more you discover more,
I
and I
love
love
I
those
love
kinds
books
of
like that.
books. So,
Mm.
oh no, that's my first recommendation of the show, and we're only talking for, oh, I apologize now. You may end up with like 40 odd recommendations by the time the show's over. But it was good to have somebody else on who loves Kelly Armstrong. Woohoo!
I love her
Because,
so
like,
much.
I've just read Bitten, Stolen, I'm about to start Dime
Dinosaur
Store
Magic.
Magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 her third one. So
Yeah, I
I'm
read those
getting
as they were
into, like,
coming
cause
out. I love them.
yeah, and I've just discovered them. So I'm feeling a little bit behind on this whole tour, but because I kind of made a mistake. I saw Waking Up the Witch, and I read that one first, and then realized that wasn't the first one in a series. That was like
Yeah.
12th or 9th or something. And I was like, oh, no, no way. So
I literally read
I
the
then
third
found
one
the.
first. I think the
Oh,
third
you
one had
did
just
as
come out in
well?
paperback. Yeah, the third one had just come out in paperback. So Dinosaur Magic had just come out in paperback, and I was with my mum in Waterstones actually, and she picked it up and was like, "Oh, this sounds amazing!" And I remember I read it, and it worked out quite well because that was the first page book, and then I went back and read the first Eleanor ones, and I was like every year, the highlight of my year for like 10 years basically was the release of the new Kelly Armstrong Women of the Otherworld books.
I know, like I'm just starting it, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I've just read her first one in the Omen series. Have you tried Omens yet?
I have, yeah.
Do you agree that one was good?
It was very good. I think I have a soft spot for the Women of the Otherworld because I started there, but I've read a
Yeah,
lot of Kelly Armstrong's books, like I would say nearly all of them maybe, because
yeah,
like for many, many years she was just an auto-buy author for me. Um,
yeah,
just yeah, I just like I love them. But I do love, I mean, I've got a very, very big soft spot for the werewolves in that series, you know, like Eleanor and Clay and
yeah,
Jeremy. They're still some of my favorite characters, and because I love witchy books, the Paige and Lucas, you know, characters
yeah.
are my favorites as well. So I always gravitate back towards those books.
So that makes me curious. Did you so this has got to start a debate. I know this question's going to start a debate, but what did you think of sort of the one done by Maggie Stiefner? She did like
Oh, the Raven Cycle
she
books.
did a trilogy. Yeah, like the author her, but she did the werewolf books. I'm trying to remember the title now.
I haven't read
She
them.
did a trilogy. Oh, you haven't?
No, I haven't. I own
Oh,
them, but I haven't read them yet.
I read the first one and I adored it. And now I'm in the second one, and it's a little bit slower. Shiver, that's the one I was thinking of. It was
Yeah, yeah.
Shiver, Linger, Forever, and Sinner. So I actually forgot there was 4. Huh. Okay, I feel a little bit out of whack, but never mind. So yeah, like I was a little bit nervous because everyone told me, "Oh my god, they're not as good as Twilight. They're not as good as like Bitten and all this other stuff." And I was like, "No, I'm gonna try it." Like, because I'm not one of these people that if you tell me something's bad and it's like a majority, telling me it's bad, I still have to go read it myself because
Yeah.
I need to know for myself that it's bad. Um, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I'm like glad that I didn't listen. Like I struggled a little bit with the Raven Boys, getting into it, but then when I got into it, it was fine because I find it a little bit confusing at parts. But I genuinely really loved it. So yeah, I think like you should definitely try them because I think everybody oversold how bad they were, and
I think I would
actually the
really enjoy
characters are
them.
really really good. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'll
I
like
think
them.
yeah. Have you actually tried Rachel Kane? Did you come across her in your travels?
I did. I read some Rachel
You
Kane when I was
did.
younger. Yeah.
Yeah, she was my go-to by author. I met her in Glasgow, and she actually encouraged
Amazing.
me to actually become an author. She really pushed me to do it.
Oh,
And I felt so honored to have known her while she was with us. But yeah, like her vampire series was amazing. I loved how she used physics. I mean, how
yes.
many, like, honestly, like, how many novels can we say that are fantasy based that we know uses physics?
Yeah, they're almost like science fantasy, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and I just was like, oh, I adore this. And then I did the silly thing and I didn't read her blurbs because
Oh
she was
no.
my go-to by author, and I got caught out with her crime series, of course. But I love that. And what do you think of the library series that she's done?
Yeah, I've only read one and I really enjoyed it. So I have more. I don't know how many
Oh, oh wait,
I've got, but
wait,
yeah.
wait, honey, till you touch the second one. See the second one. Whew. I was like, I gotta breathe here. It's like really intense, but I loved it. So I like keep telling everybody like gotta do it. But I must admit, I hate reading the Anda series. So like
Yeah,
I have the last um Throne of Glass one, and I've been
that one is so
terrible
good.
because I just can't bring myself to read
It
the
is
last one. I'm
so
like, I
good.
don't want it to end.
I think I cried through about two-thirds of that book just because I didn't want it to end.
Yeah, I know, but then I keep like telling myself she's writing the Court of Thorn and Roses. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I was like, because the other one I found that I fell in love with, this is our go to by author for me, is um Imagine Me. The author for
Mm,
Imagine Me.
yeah, I've
I
not
can't
read any of
pronounce
the
her name,
Shackney
so I'm
books.
gonna let you do it.
Tari Mafi, yeah.
Yeah, like her series, the idea of like the way she did that first one, where it's all in a cell, a prison cell,
Mm,
just I thought it was so incredibly done. Like I was actually like surprised I didn't get bored of it, like or anybody to get bored of it. I was just like the way she did it was just incredible, and the like her use of flashbacks too. I thought it
mm.
was like really smart the way she did it. So yeah, she's now on my list for go to buys, but I really need to limit my go to buys because my I've kind of got quite a few now.
That's the problem, yeah.
It's awful, but I think you're gonna be a go to buy. And I was like, Ian, the girl I'm interviewed today, I'm thinking she's gonna be a new go to buy, and he's like, no.
Oh.
I'm like,
If
sorry,
you
can't
like
help it.
slow if you like slow burn books, then yes, I think so.
I do like a
I
slow
like
burner.
really like a creepy gothic type, when they take
I
time
love
to set
those
things up.
books. Yeah.
Like I read Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. I don't know if you read that one, but that was
Yep.
phenomenal and that's a really good slow burn. I love that one.
I see. Like that's the thing. Like I really do like slow burns because I read Young Elites, and that's really fast. I
Mm,
don't know if you've done that with Mary Lou, but
I've
that's a
not.
really fast.
No.
Oh, it's good because it reminded me a little bit of like a witch gone dementedly mad, because she's almost like a psychopath witch who's sort of been driven there by magic, and
Mm,
it's not really her fault that she's doing the things she's doing, but she can't control herself. And it's so fast, that whole book, and it was so much more gory than I like thought it was going to be, but it wasn't like to the point where it put me off. It was to the point where I was like, okay, I'm really into this, but this is a little scary at the same time. Like it was too fast for me. I think I would have liked it a little bit slower
if it was
pace.
slowed down. Yeah, I
Um,
like books that kind of
yeah,
go there, like with the horror elements. I love like kind of horror fantasy and things like that. I think my books kind of stray a little bit into horror
yeah,
territory, but I like taking the time to let scenes breathe. And I like reading books
yeah,
like that as
yeah,
well.
especially. Well, that's what I did with Carla. I let the scenes breathe, and then when it needed to pick up speed, I let it pick up speed, but then I cooled it off a little bit so that you could appreciate each sort of step that she took. Because she goes from like, her journey is so funny because she's like a reader who then ends up in a fantasy world. So she's gone from being a booktuber reviewer to then, oh my god, I'm suddenly kind of in this immortal fantasy world. My heart's broken because, you know, my first love has broken my heart and has caused me to end up in this position. And now I don't know, like, you know, who's after me, who's not. And then now my best friend's back with me, but she has so much she can lose. And I think that the dread of what is she going to lose kind of keeps everybody going through it.
Yeah, it's a good
so
motivator.
Like everyone says, Mines is a very slow burn, but if you stick with it, I think I have a lot of people that tells me it's worth it, but again, it's like slow. So I have to ask, because like we have like a lot of kind of ideas in common. What was your feelings or your thoughts on the Outlander books?
So, you know what? This is going to embarrass me. I've not read them. But my best friend waxes lyrical about them. She loves them so much, and me and her have very, very similar tastes. So I actually think I would really enjoy them. The only thing that ever puts me off long books is that usually I'm on deadline now, and I am, you know, writing, and I'm book selling, and I'm probably reading books for like friends as well to blurb books, and you know, reading to blurb for people that I've never met and things like that. So that's the only thing that puts me off reading long books, is that I don't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to them. But the actual principle of the idea and the fact that they are long makes me very happy, because I think I, like, as a young reader, I would go into the library and like literally pick the longest books I could find. So there's still some of that in me, I think.
Yeah, and it's weird because like I just took the leap. I think it was last week, and I sent the Orchid Guild to some of the most best-selling YA children's writers in the world, and now I'm breaking it a little bit because it's that moment of like, these are my idols. Like Marianne Curley's reading the Orchid Guild right now, and then Celia Reese is reading the Orchid Guild right now, and a friend of mine, she reads kind of more, like, she's more sort of historical, you know, she's a historical bestseller, and I'm like, I gave it to her, and I have one other person I'm going to send it to, and I am just like breaking it to see what people think, like, because it got rejected so much, and I was like, I couldn't really decide if it was my dyslexia that was causing it, or like I'm just trying to find the right person for it and the right agent for it, and I'm like, so I sent it to the two of the biggest names, and I'm like, guys, can you tell me what you think of this, and then maybe give me like an idea of where I need to go with it, because I'm honestly, because I walked away 2 years ago from writing because I just lost utter faith in the industry for a while. I had really bad experiences with an agent who was signing my name to contracts that I didn't know anything about. So I had like a bad agent, and then I had several bad publishing experiences. So I decided, like, I'm done, I'm walking away. And so I'm kind of getting back into it, but from like scratch. So yeah, it's been it's a journey. Like people don't realize, like, even if you've been an author for years, if you step away for even like 6 months and you're trying to come back, it's like a totally different world because you're constantly learning as an author.
Everything changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you're constantly, like, the market changes and you have to research everything all over again and find your place and your voice and everything. But it was so funny because I wrote Orchid Guild through the last year because I had sepsis. I got sepsis in my jaw joints and I had to get my jaw joints replaced. But I had like 6 months where they were out and I couldn't eat. So I was constantly editing and rewriting this book. And then I saved up the money that I had, and I got a freelance writer, and I got her to edit it. And then I was like, okay, I went, and then I read it through ICU and HDU because I had nothing else to do. I had 3 weeks where I literally didn't sleep because it was that heat wave of last year. and my hospital didn't have air conditioning because people don't realize British hospitals don't have air conditioning. So I was melting. So yeah, for 3 weeks I just read this book, and I fell in love with the characters all over again, because it's like Celtic mythology meets Redding, California. This
That's
tiny
amazing.
town in California, just this, living the sunny, happy life, all of a sudden gets invaded by Celtic mythology and creatures. So we've got Selkies, and we've got vampires and werewolves and witches and angels, and this girl's just like losing her mind because all this stuff started happening and she has no clue what's happening to her. And then I used diary entries kind of to give a little bit more of her insights into her mind and stuff. So it's kind of fun.
Awesome.
I like it. But yeah, breaking it a little bit. So was that like how it was for you when you kind of like sent your book out? Where you kind of almost like,
It's it's always scary whenever you send a new book out, whether it's to someone that you've sent it before. Sending my agent a book is always scary. Sending my friends a book is always scary, but I think it's
mm-hmm.
worth it because it creates a mental space as well between you and the book. Like, even if I'm not expecting feedback, even if I'm just kind of sending it away, there is a period of time where that book is like not on my desk, it's not in my head, or it's not like at the forefront of my
Yeah,
mind. So it gives me, I think, the time to create like a mental distance, and like it, I don't know, enables you to just see it with fresh eyes again. I am a great believer in the whole putting a book away, putting it in a
yep,
in a box if you can, and not looking at it for a while,
yep.
because it
I do
definitely,
that a lot, yeah.
yeah, it makes the world of a difference. Even just having, say, like 2 weeks break, but it being completely like off your desk, um, is so much better than if you were constantly working on it. So yeah, it's always scary
Exactly.
though.
So when you sort of, what was the inspiration for you to write this particular book? Was there something that clicked in your head and said, I've got to write this? Or was it just a case of, it just sort of slowly came to you and you ended up plotting it out and ended up realizing, oh, I've got a book here?
No, it was very instantaneous. There was a conversation on Twitter a few years ago where people were talking about, if you could have written any classic, which classic would you pick and why? And I definitely spent way too much time thinking about this, because I was a bit like, well, okay, so if I wrote a classic, it obviously wouldn't be the same classic, because it'd be me writing it, and I'm very different than a lot of classic authors in the fact that, A, I'm not a man, and B, I'm queer, which probably makes a big difference too. And I came to rest on the fact that the book that impacted me most and that changed kind of the course of my life was The Great Gatsby. I read it when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing my A levels. The first time I read it, I hated it, and our teacher was like, "Okay, but read it again and just slower, like read it slower." And I did.
Yeah.
And once we started talking about the themes and kind of, the idea of it being a coming of age story, but it's also a book about morality, it's a book about mortality. I really like the themes of Gatsby, as well as obviously like the aesthetic of like the 1920s and the glitz and the glamour and all that jazz. And I started to realize that, like, okay, if I wrote The Great Gatsby, what would that look like? And I was like, well, it would have to be gender bent, because I primarily write female casts. And if I'm going to make it gender bent, well, it's going to be sapphic as well. So that was the first step. And then I was thinking
Of
to myself,
course.
well, if it's going to be set in the 1920s and there's glitz and the glamour, there is a very dark undercurrent to The Great Gatsby that I think a lot of people forget about. They focus on the big parties and
Yeah.
the alcohol and the music, and they don't really think about the fact that there is literal murder in this book. Like, it is very dark. A lot of these people
Yep.
have got
It
money
is,
by,
yeah.
yeah, it's so bad. And so I was thinking, well, it's going to be a book about morally grey people. That is a given. But why are they morally grey, and what causes that? And I was thinking, well, as my teenage charmed obsessed self, and I'm still super into all my witches and stuff, what would it be like if I wrote a book that was
Mm-hmm.
basically The Great Gatsby, but with witches? And if the witchcraft is the reason why they question their morality. And I think that's a really fun thing to play with, and I've thoroughly enjoyed writing it because it was a way of me kind of questioning. It allows my characters to question whether they are good people, by virtue of who they are themselves, but also how they interact with their magic. And it was a really fun challenge. And then while I was drafting it, it was kind of like this. I was completely obsessed. It was a head over heels situation where I started writing this book for fun. It was never meant to be anything other than a fun project, but I was just totally consumed by it and I couldn't think about anything else. And a colleague of mine passed away during this period, and so it also became
Oh
a
no.
way for me to channel kind of grief. And like it was the first time that I'd experienced loss like as an adult. And although we weren't super close
Yeah.
friends, we were friends, and we'd started at Waterstones at the same time. And it was a very strange kind of grieving process, and so I channeled all of that into the writing as well. And so it also became similar to Gatsby, I guess, a book about mortality and like the nature of death. And it became so much bigger than it was to start with. Like it started off as a fun little joke on Twitter, and it just became this project that I was totally consumed by. And even after I finished writing it, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I needed to do something with it. And I said to my agent, what do you think? Do you think we can sell this? And my agent doesn't really represent fantasy very much, so we weren't really sure like the best market for it or where to submit it. But it all ended up working out in the end, and it was great. So yeah, that was the long-winded answer, but yeah, it was a book that became very much a passion project, and I'm still obsessed with it now. When I decided I wanted to get it published, I was like, realistically, what I want is I'd love it to reach readers and I'd love it to matter to them. But my main goal was to get it so that I had a copy of it on my shelf so that I could read it again if I wanted to.
Yeah. And it was weird because I had an author on yesterday who said the whole reason she started writing was so that she could look at her bookshelf when she was older and she'd have a bookshelf of stories she would want to read because the stories she wanted to read didn't exist.
Absolutely.
I agreed with that. Yeah, I agreed with that. And I was going to ask you the same question. Like, do you feel as an author that sometimes we can't find the stories that we want to read, so we almost feel like we need to go write it ourselves, and that's why we do what we do?
Yeah, I think the thing is as well.
So I've got it.
I love books that allow characters to be messy. I really like those sorts of books, and particularly books with queer characters that are allowed to be messy. They're not necessarily nice people, because people aren't always nice all the time. And I think that a lot of witchy books as well, there's a history of them being either they're historical kind of Salem witch trials era, or they are contemporary and they're quite fluffy, a little bit like Sabrina the Teenage Witch vibes. And I wanted something that was very much like in the middle. It has that dark element to it, but it's not necessarily as historical as Salem.
Of course, yeah. No, I get that. And I think if you've seen the new Sabrina version, the Netflix one?
The Chilling Adventures, yeah.
Yeah, like I liked it because it felt great, but then I also was kind of torn because I was like, but I am a fan of the original Sabrina. I know the person that wrote that originally. And I kind of was just like,
the original.
Oh, but yeah. And then I was just like, I kind of was like, because I know Barney Cohan quite well, and I was just like, oh no, Barney, your stuff's getting vamped. And then I watched it and it was totally nothing like what he had written, and it was kind of a little bit, I don't want to say a relief, but I was kind of like, at least his stuff wasn't getting revamped and changed. So it was like his stuff was being immortalized but in a different way. So I kind of ended up liking it because it was different. And I like when I see different witches stuff, because not all witches were, killed in witch trials. There was more to witch life and stuff than we are ever kind of let on. So I always like to think on, I wonder what witches might have done at this time, or what witches might do at this point, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but I like to find different witch perspectives, and I love the fact
Me
that
too.
yours is that. So I noticed, like, and I know that a lot of readers are going to notice this too because it's on your website, but what made you change genres from what you were doing before to doing fantasy now?
So it wasn't so much a change in direction as like I wanted two parallel streams. I have always liked writing crime. I will continue to write crime for as long as I'm able to. I read crime a lot as a teenager. Excuse me, and I used to read a lot of like
Same, yeah.
Agatha Christie. I started off there. Patricia Cornwell. I was obsessed with Patricia Cornwell for a few years, and but I was always writing fantasy as well. So it just seemed like a natural thing for me to do
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. I'd say honestly really cool answers, like, because sometimes things will just take you in a slightly different direction that makes you change genre. Like, I know myself, like, I don't stick to one genre. I might be known as a sports romance author, but I've written crime, I've written all different kinds of things. I've just never released them, and I think,
Yeah.
We as writers, we do like to change things up a bit, and just to
We like to do a bit of everything,
see
don't
what
we?
we can
Yeah.
do
And
almost.
the whole
Yeah,
time,
and I think
my
that's the good thing
goal.
about us. We like a bit of taste, bit of
Yes,
different stuff going on. And
absolutely.
I must admit, I realized that I am slightly biased. I will more likely read a crime novel if it's written by somebody from Britain than I do if it's an American. And I don't know why that is.
That's really interesting.
But yeah, so I probably will be adding your books to my pile, which husband
Amazing.
will not be
They
happy about.
they're very British as well. Like I think my fantasy sits very much more on that cusp where I use a lot of American influences, and I because I have
Yeah,
a lot of American readers as well. And I studied
of
American
course.
literature, right? Like I lived in America for a
Yeah.
year. I consider myself spiritually, like I feel homesickness sometimes for where I lived in North Carolina. So I love
Oh
American
wow.
culture,
Yeah.
and yeah, it is that kind of hybrid culture which I do like to feed into my fantasy. But my crime books,
Yeah.
they are very British. They are set usually, well, the first two are set in the middle of England. They're set local to me. They're set in Derbyshire. But actually, funnily enough, my
Yeah.
next two, so the one that just came out in February, The Lighthouse, and the one that's coming out next year, are both set in Scotland. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so they're
That
kind
could
of
be interesting.
homegrown. The lighthouse is set in like it's a remote island off the coast where there is a lighthouse. Funnily enough, because in the title, which a group of friends go and stay at. So yeah, I love
Yep.
anything that's like very good at evoking
Ooh.
atmosphere, and I think that British landscape is amazing for that. I think it's such a beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful country and beautiful island, and you know it's like when I set books in Derbyshire. Derbyshire is so lush and so green and so verdant, and like I've not really been anywhere else like that.
Yep.
Like it's so beautiful and atmospheric, and yeah, it definitely was a factor in kind of wanting to do different things with different types of books. But everything is all about atmosphere always.
It has to be, because I think that's either makes it or breaks it, I think. And I don't think, like, a lot of people necessarily realize that that's what we as writers need to kind of consider when we're doing novels and when we're working on things, that it really is about having that connection and creating those elements so that we can have a really awesome experience, and a really good rounded experience in a world that we've created. Highly recommend, if you're ever doing a writer's retreat, to go up to the Shetland Islands during the summer, so May to September, because the fact it doesn't get dark at night, the sun never sets,
Yes.
and the northern lights are everywhere, and you're steeped in history, And everybody that sort of has a belief in magic, and I can kind of back this up, you feel like a magic in the air from the minute you step onto the island, and you just feel steeped into it, like you're stepping into a bath of magical powers.
That sounds
So
amazing.
highly recommend a trip. It is a bit pricey, but great.
Worth it.
And I'm like you. I am Scottish, but I spent some time in LA, and I really, really miss it. I really miss America, but I miss the sunshine. I don't miss the constant rain,
Yes.
and awful weather. And it's so funny you say North Carolina, because I know Matt and Jeff Hardy from North Carolina. If you've stayed there, you'll know who they are.
Yeah.
They're the Hardy Boys. And I also know Shane Helms, who was the famous wrestler Hurricane Helms. So yeah, it's kind of a throwback, because it made me smile. I was like, oh, I wonder if Shane met her.
That's amazing.
So yeah, sometimes text him, and he's like, hi. So a little bit of fun fact there. But let's talk books. As readers, we all love this subject. So what is the book you've read most recently that stuck with you the most?
So, the book I keep coming back to and I cannot stop thinking about is it's out in, I think, October. It's out at the end of the year anyway. And it's House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson, and it is basically a sapphic retelling of the Blood Countess. It's just amazing. So she's the author of Year of the Witching, which I loved. If you love witchy historical fiction, then
I'm
that is
about
definitely
to try it. So yeah,
so good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But House of Hunger was phenomenal. I finished it, and I don't think I stopped thinking about it for about 4 days, where I was just like turning it over in my mind constantly. There was just, because it kind of is very much, it's horror and it's fantasy and it sits on that cusp, and I think it's officially coded to horror, but it's just so fantastical. And no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was brilliant.
Yeah, you've got me itching now to read The Hour of the Witching, which with my TBR kind of, I'm like, who do you wish that, if you had infinite time and you could just sit and you could read and you can enjoy, one, what series would you pick? Two, what author would you pick, and why? So it's a toughie.
That is a tough one. I think series, I'm going to go with Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series, because there's so many books and there's so many pages.
Oh, okay.
And, I've been putting them off because they're so long. So if I had a lot of time, definitely, I would go with those.
That one is a good series, I must admit. I read the first book, and the second book, I would say there's trigger warnings with it. Just be aware, but overall it's really, really good. The characters and the detail for the settings is amazing as well. So you've picked a really good one for that. What about authors?
Oh, I have so many books on my TBR, and I know it would be cheating, but I would just like to read them all. Everything that is currently on my TBR.
That is cheating. You have to pick one. You gotta pick one. One author.
So is this one author that I haven't read any books by or want to read them, or is it an author that I have read before and want to read all of their books?
That you want to read, yeah, like you haven't had the chance to sit and read them, yeah. It's tough. I'm holding you to this one.
Yeah, I know, it's very hard. I think probably an author that I haven't read very many books. I think I literally only read like half of a book, so I don't think this counts. And that would be Anne Rice. Because I started reading Witching Hour and didn't finish it because it's quite a chunky one.
It really is.
Interview with the Vampire either. Like, I can't believe I've not read Interview with the Vampire, but I haven't. So
you have to, girl. You have to.
I know. So definitely Anne Rice is on my list of authors that I have not fully experienced and want to.
Okay, that was I'll let you away with that one. Yeah, I love that. What author do you wish that you could, if you had a chance to sit, have a cuppa with or a meal with, and just talk to them, like just talk to them about anything you want? Who would it be and why?
So I don't think he would like me very much, but I would definitely like to have had a conversation and possibly some drinks with Scott Fitzgerald because because I'm just
Okay.
like, I've written a reimagining of Gatsby, and yeah, maybe he's rolling in his grave, but
Mm-hmm.
his writing style was so beautiful, like the language that he used, and I would like to talk to him and see if you kind of see that when you talk to him, like whether or not it shines through, whether it, the majesty of his prose is visible, or
Mm-hmm.
if it is something that he labored over, because I know that he would spend a lot of time working on his writing, so like I can't imagine that it would have just like flown out like that. But I just think it would be really interesting to talk to somebody whose prose I know is amazing and whose writing style I really admire, and just to see.
Yeah, I think he would be very. Actually, I think he'd probably be very honored that people have loved his work for so long, and that there's so many different spins that people have put on it. I think he would actually be more admirable about that, and I think,
I think so,
yeah, I think
maybe,
he would
yeah.
probably really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think also I think it
So,
would impress him to know that Gatsby, because when he was alive, Gatsby was his worst selling book. His career basically like tanked. So he started off with his first book that did really well, and then progressively each of his books did
yeah,
less and less well. And I just think like to tell him that Gatsby is the book that people always go back to, and that
yeah,
it
of
has
course, yeah.
changed culture, like that I think he would be very bemused probably by that.
I think he would be amused, but I think he would. I think he would appreciate the love that people have shown him and that they continue to show him. And I think the films would probably tickle his sense of humor a great deal
Yeah,
as
I think
well.
so.
I wonder what he would think of that now.
Yeah,
Is
the
there
Baz
an
Luhrmann.
author past and yeah, past and present who's influenced, inspired, and made you excited about A, reading, and B, writing?
Kelly Armstrong for me. So I read those books when I was 13, 14. It was a very pivotal age. I was already writing, but not with the same fervor and the same obsession. And then when I discovered her
Yeah,
books and discovered that you can write books that are fun, but also that speak to people, I think that was a
yeah,
really important moment for me. So yeah, and I still go back to them as being favorite books. So
I like that. Yeah. What time would you visit if you could go back in time? And would you go back as a writer?
I would love to go back to the 1920s. I know this is a big cop out, but I think that particularly I'd like to go to America in the 20s. I think I would like to experience what that was like. Whether or not
Yeah.
like, because obviously it's a time of very diverse ideals, and you've got this kind of
Hmm.
you've still got the kind of straight laced situation happening, but then you've got this kind of new up and coming rebellion happening in people, and yeah, I think that would be really fun. But if I was going to go back as a writer for sure, I would want to be included in all these fancy salons that they did, with the Fitzgerald and the Hemingway. And I don't think they'd like me for sure, but I would like to have been part of that.
You never know. You never know. They might have been more appreciative than you think. Writers were more open minded, apparently. Is there ever been a book that you have picked up and wished, like, thought to yourself, what was I thinking? Why did I pick this up? And what was it that made you not grateful to have picked it up?
My instinctive response would be no, because all books are important in terms of how they develop us as writers and readers. But there is one, there is one that I come back to that
Yeah.
I absolutely like. In some ways, I am glad I read it, and so it's not 100% like I probably wouldn't go back and erase the memory of it if I could, but there was a book that I had to read for one of my classes, and it was
Yep.
called An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser. And this book's quite long. It's like
Right.
700 pages long. And the first 600 pages I quite enjoyed, right?
Wow.
Like, it's a book about a man who basically he does the unthinkable. He basically gets a girl pregnant and then kills her. It's awful. It's an
Oh,
awful book, but I
okay.
do like books. It's
Yeah.
hideous, but I do like books about morally grey characters, and he is morally grey, like as grey as they come. But the last 100 pages of
Yep.
that book ruined it, because this is a massive spoiler. I don't think I was going to read it though. But basically, the last 100 pages sum up the entire book that you've read, but through the idea of like a court case. So you're basically just
Oh,
rehashing all of these plot points that you have been present for, and listening to him like narrate
throughout
his
the whole
story.
thing.
Yeah, and I'm just sat there
Yep.
like, mate, I've just spent 600 pages reading this. I don't need to hear it again. This is so annoying.
Yeah, it just ruins it kind of idea. But I kind of see where he's going with it, because he's trying to give the closure of the court case and the closure
Yeah,
of action
but
being taken. So, but no, I'm with you on that. I would probably throw the book across the room and be like,
I was so
I'm done
frustrated.
with
I
you.
was so angry. And I remember going to my professor and saying, why did you make us read this in a class called The Great American Novel? And he said, well, you need to read some bad Great American novels before you read some good ones.
So, yeah, so you can so you can actually appreciate. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I got
exactly.
that.
And so I think that's a very valid point, actually, is sometimes you have to read books that you don't like in order to understand what you do like. But yeah,
Yep,
I wouldn't reread it, let's put it that way. It's the only book I've ever rated 1 star on Goodreads.
exactly. So now we're going to enter into the next part of the podcast, which is the writing part of the podcast, where we discuss what it is about us as writers, like little snippets of our lives as writers that we wouldn't necessarily share. So, the first question is, how did you go about creating the darker elements in your storylines?
Honestly, I think this for me is very instinctive and it's very intuitive. That element of it anyway, because I really do like books about the darker side of human nature. I think it's one of the things that drives me to write crime, and it's also one of the things that I like about fantasy is that you can get darker. And so for me, it's all about creating an atmosphere. And so I do things like listening to atmospheric music and creating Pinterest boards. Um, in order to develop the picture in my mind of what it is that I'm going to be looking at. But it's also about just exploring characters to almost their limits, really, figuring out at what point they stop being good people. Because I think that a lot of people would have a limit
Yeah,
at which they, would start making negative choices, and knowing what that limit is for those
yeah,
characters. And for some of them, the limit is very small, actually, and for some of them it's a lot greater. um and also looking at like the impact that it has on their lives going forward. So if one character makes one bad decision, how much does that then impact them going forward? And it's just about kind of exploring that. And the way that I would do that is I would often sit and write, I call them like character flashes, or they're almost like flashbacks, but written in a narrative form. And
yeah,
they might never actually appear in the book, but I then know the trigger points for the characters. I'll write, like important moments in their life, or things like what's the worst thing that's ever happened to them up until this point, kind of thing.
yeah. No, I like that. It's really good for me in particular. I have to do a whole creative music thing and really sort of lock myself into a darker kind of frame of mind, whether it's watching something dark before I go write or something along that lines to kind of create it for me. So I like the way you've put it. What inspired you to pick the type of genre for your writing that you did?
It's the kind of genre that I like to read, and I think that in recent years there hasn't been as much dark fantasy, and not necessarily dark romance either,
Yeah,
just like fantasy with almost horror elements. And I really like reading that because I'm kind of a horror fan, and I also like
yeah,
books that do look at the darker side of human nature. So like I said before, it's the reason I like reading crime as well. So yeah, it's just kind of wanting to see myself represented in the kind of narratives that I've always wanted
Yeah.
to read.
Yeah. No, I like that, and I think we all need to add something to our world almost. So yeah, I like that. I kind of I very much appreciate that in a way. So I guess the next one is it's going to be a little bit more interesting. Um, but when you write your novels and you're putting them together, because I know for crime and fantasy it might be a bit different, but is it like a movie for you, or is it like a jigsaw puzzle that you're trying to like put the pieces together?
Yeah, I would say it's less movie, it's more jigsaw. I think it probably sits somewhere in the middle where every scene is about asking a question, and I do visualize the scenes quite cinematically when I'm writing them, but every scene leads to the next. So I'm
Yeah,
quite an intuitive writer. Like I used to not plot books. I still prefer not to plot them ahead of time. I would much rather sit down and just let
right.
characters interact in what seems like a natural way for them, given the way that I built them, and then kind of go from there. So it is very much, I suppose, more on the jigsaw element, but it's almost like an interactive jigsaw.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. I love that kind of idea on it. But for me, like I can never get by the movie kind of section, even when I am doing my crime versions, because I seem to get kind of like stuck there.
Yeah.
And if I do it as a yeah, I get really stuck if I don't plot it out and I know exactly where I'm going. Unfortunately, so do you like? Do you have a dream for your novels in the future? Like, what do you dream the most in regards to success, in regards to where you want your novel to go? Do you have something along that lines that you kind of envision for it?
Honestly, for me, it's about longevity and it's about building a career. So I just want to be able to
Yeah,
keep writing. That is my primary motivator, and I want to be able to keep writing in a way where I can like actually afford to, live. Um, so whether or not, like, I would
yeah,
love
of
to be able to work
course.
full time, for example. But it's more about the fact that it's just I want to be able to keep writing stories that I want to write, and I want them to reach readers because then feels less like creating in a vacuum. So, in terms of physical goals, I would really like to have more hardback
Yeah,
releases because I think that they're beautiful and I love hardback books. And having the hardback for Wild and Wicked
so
Things
do
is
I. I
glorious.
really do.
Yeah, so I love that. So that would be nice.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, what would be the dream that you would love to achieve in the next 5 years? What would be the biggest goal that you would love to achieve?
So Wild and Wicked Things hit the Sunday Times bestseller list, and like I know it probably seems a little bit greedy, but I would really love to do that again with another book, because I
Yeah,
feel
of
like it
course.
it you know it indicates that there is a desire for these kinds of stories. I think particularly with sapphic stories, it's really nice to show that there is a
Yeah,
market for them and that people want to read them. Um, I also really just would
yeah.
like readers to really connect with my books. So, you know, it would be really nice
Mm-hmm.
if people on social media would be very, very supportive of books in the future. I think it's just kind of that's where I would like to end up with it is that I'll have like a fan base of readers who will also buy my books. That would be great.
Well, I certainly think you can add me to your fan base, and I can see me checking out a lot of your stuff in the future. That's for sure.
Thank you.
You've definitely made a fan out of me, but then I might just be
Yay.
biased. You never know.
Maybe a little
Um,
bit.
I say this, and then I'm gonna like one day I'll send you my book, and you'll be like,
No.
"Don't tell her I don't like it." Actually, I'm very good about that kind of stuff. Because not everything's for everybody. What
No, that's very
techniques
true.
have you found helpful, and which ones do you wish that you hadn't tried?
So in some ways, this is the same answer, and this is plotting ahead of time. In that it is helpful in terms of
Yeah.
plot structure, and I would
Hmm.
say it's helpful in terms of building like a cohesive first draft. But also, part of me kind of wishes that
Yeah,
I'd never had to do it and never had to try it because I love the experience
of
of
course.
messily drafting a book and like not knowing where it's going and not having a preconceived notion in my head of where I need to end up. Like on the one hand, it's nice to be able to write by numbers, which is like the way that my brain says that this is what plotting is. But on the other hand, like I just want to be able to
Yeah.
draw stickmen and and see what happens with them. So
And
a bit of
pants
both,
it,
really.
yeah, it's just see what happens. Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I get that. I can't, I couldn't do it, so I have utter respect for you on that account. Now moving into your life, which is the kind of the gossipy side for the listeners and the readers. What is the first thing you want to do, or you do, when you're trying to de-stress from editing and writing?
So I have two options, and it usually depends what time of day it is. My very boring option
Okay.
is my first instinct is always to sleep. Like if my brain is like
Yeah.
overwhelmed and I need a break, I am the world's biggest napper. Like I think I maybe should have been a cat in
Oh, I
another
love
life
that
or
too.
something. So I do
See, if
just
I
go
could
and
nap
sleep.
more often, I would. Oh, you're a girl
I
after
nap
my own heart.
so regularly, and like so I've had long COVID, right? And so I've experienced more fatigue since I had COVID last year, but I've always been a napper,
Yeah.
so it's just like an extreme. It's like extreme napping now.
Or it could just be an excuse to nap, I suppose.
This is a good excuse. And my second option, my I guess maybe slightly more interesting option, but not really, is I really love walking. Um, I used to
Uh
go
huh.
out with my dad all the time. We'd find places in Derbyshire, particularly because it's local to us, but also it's
Yeah.
beautiful, and just go and get out of the house because I am terrible for like languishing in my bed, you know. So the other option is to drag my butt out of my bed and go for a walk, and it often does shake things loose. Like if I'm stuck on a problem, um, usually I'll just rant at whoever I'm walking
Yeah.
with, whether it's my dad or whether it's somebody else, and I'll be like, "Here's some plot that I need help with," and they never even have to say anything; they just listen to me, and I'm
Trust
you
me,
know,
I'm somebody
and
that does the same. Yeah, I'm with you
it's so
on that
addictive.
because if I didn't have Ian, I'd never leave the house. So,
Yeah.
yeah. What hobbies do you enjoy, and which ones do you wish that you could explore more if you had the time?
In terms of hobbies I enjoy, I have a few hobbies I come back to. I don't really watch a lot of TV, and I'm not really a big crafter. I do like to play games on my Nintendo Switch, um, but I tend to go through fallow periods with that, where like, you know, for 6 months I'll be obsessed with the
Yeah.
game, and then I won't touch it for ages. Um, but also it kind of feeds into my other hobby, which is my pets, because I have a lot of pets. I have two dogs at the moment,
Ah,
soon to be three.
okay.
So I'll probably have three by the time this
Wow.
airs. Because we lost one back in February, and we've been sort of deciding whether or not to
Oh
get another one. And
no.
I know it was really sad.
Yeah.
She'd been quite quite disabled for some time, and so we knew it was going to happen. But when we lost her, it was a bit of a
Yeah.
shock, and so we're on the road to sort of getting ready for another dog. We have Newfoundlands, so they are huge and they
Oh,
are
yeah.
very much like labor intensive dogs. And I also have three cats.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so I have two Maine
How did they
Coons,
get
and I have
on with the
a.
cats?
You know what? They get on really well. The dogs do have a tendency sometimes to chase the cats, but it's very playful. It's not aggressive, and the
Yeah.
cats just run away, and you know, it's kind of a fun game for both of them. I think the cats less so, I think, but they they do seem
Yeah.
to enjoy it. And the rest of the time, when they're not chasing each other, they're completely chill. They'll come and lie. Like the Maine Coons, particularly, will come and lie on the floor next to the dogs, like dogs. It's very weird. It's just like having very big dogs and
Yeah.
very small dogs. They're not like normal cats. They're a bit
Well, I've
weird.
got two cats, and I have two beautiful cats. I have one that was a stray that had gotten abandoned by its mother and ended up in a car engine.
Oh
And
goodness.
we got him when he was a few weeks old, and he imprinted on Bob, which is our 3-year-old, or he was 3 at the time, 3-year-old cat, who has never forgiven me for Stefano. Because the first morning that he spent all night with Stefano, we opened the bedroom door and poor Bob was standing and Stefano was hanging off the end of his tail, and Stefano had both paws around the tail plus his jaws on the tail, and he was flying about as Bob was trying to like get rid of him off the
Get
end
him
of his
off.
tail.
Yeah.
And it was the look he gave me as if to say, how dare you do this to me? I will never forgive you. And
how could you?
yeah, I get that look every morning when I come through, and I was going to get a St. Bernard's pup. I was going to save up and get a St. Bernard's pup. And Ian's like, no. He's like, could you imagine a St. Bernard's with these two cats? Honestly, they tear the house apart as is. Could you imagine having that St. Bernard's in this? So yeah, I was always curious about how the dogs got on with
they get on
the cats.
They get on fine. You know, it's amazing. I think it's probably because we've always had multiples. So for a long time,
Yeah.
They just kind of copy each other. So when we get the new puppy will see the two older dogs with the cats and be like, oh, okay, these guys are chill. They're fun. You know, it's fun, whatever.
Yeah.
And the kittens, when we had them, we got the two Maine Coons are a brother-sister duo. And we only went for one, and we came home with two. That was a great mistake. I love them to pieces; they're amazing. And our older cat, Jet, was a stray, who was found by one of our builders years and years ago when we were having some other bits of our house renovated. So we got her when she was only a few weeks old. And she's a bit strange. She's definitely a bit feral. But she very much loved our older cat at the time, who was very chill around the dog. So it's just like a generational thing. They all just seem to muddle along and get along with each other fine. But because
they learn from each other. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Because of having so many pets, they take up a lot of my time, like in a great way. You know, when we lost our middle dog Xena, the younger dog Juno was very upset because she'd grown up with her and they were very, very close. They had a very good relationship. And so I spent many hours in the garden with Juno, trying to cheer her up, like playing games with her and like inventing new things to keep her occupied, just to kind of stop her grieving, really, or stop her grieving so badly. So yeah, and because of that, you know, this brings me back to the second question you asked, which is which hobbies do you wish you had more time for? And I really love swimming, and I would love to go swimming more often. But I'm usually like, oh well, there's a vet trip, or I need to be grooming the cats, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. So it's usually some reason.
Yeah, no, I know that. I know the feeling. Yeah. I know it's gonna be worse when I have my baby, because we're trying for a baby this year. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, like how am I gonna do a podcast, write novels, keep the house? You know, like this is gonna be pretty hard going here. Thank God I've got in-laws that live 15 minutes up the road and I can hand off the babies too. But we've also got the little nervousness because I carry the gene for quads. So I'm high risk of quads thanks to having idiopathic rheumatoid arthritis has increased my fertility. So Ian kind of said, I think he spends every night praying and hoping that there won't be quads. I think I do that a little bit myself, but I would be happy if no matter what I got, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think quads would probably be like the end of my entire life. Yeah, like that's an entire family, and I know I want a lot of kids, but I don't want to have a litter in my first go round, you know. So yeah, I think that could be interesting, but yeah, cause especially since he is like no more than two, you know,
no more.
Yeah, but I think they would be adorable, so I don't think I'd care for long, but yeah, I don't think I'd be writing for the first 5 years if nothing else.
No, probably not.
So I guess the next question's kind of like being kicked out of the water here, but I'll ask it anyway. Um, do you like crafts? And is it something that you use to flush your creative part of your mind and help you reset?
So I used to be really crafty when I was a teenager. I used to spend a lot of time doing art projects, particularly. I was really into painting. I've dabbled
Yeah.
in quite a lot of crafts. Like I'm very much like I'll pick one up and then I'll kind of put it down again because they're very time intensive and I would want to be good at them.
Yeah,
And
they
so I'm
do.
not very
Yeah.
good at I'm not very good at dabbling. So I learned to knit briefly. I crocheted for a bit. I
Yep.
would like to do there's so many things I would like to do. I'd like to learn musical instruments, particularly. Just
Yeah.
any hobby across the board. I'm like, I have probably thought about this and considered it. Like I bought a ukulele at one
Hmm.
point. Did I learn to play the ukulele? No, I did not. I own a
Oh,
ukulele that has been there for ages. But in terms of crafting, I would like to learn to sew actually. I've never done that. And I would like to just be
funny
able to
you
like
say that. That's my go-to is cross stitch.
is it? See, my one of my friends is
Yeah.
super into cross stitch, and I love the things that she makes, and I just think it's so cool. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have the patience. I think is the issue. I would rather be probably doing three things with the concentration that it would probably take me to learn a new craft. So yeah, but then I'll never say
Yeah.
never because
No, I get it
you
because I
know
like. Yeah, I mean, and for me, like I'll cross stitch and I'll play League of Legends, and sometimes I'll be listening to a podcast all at the same time.
yeah
So I can understand the brain power of needing to do more than like one thing at a time. And I think that's where I'm really lucky because my nan she was a professional knitter and she knitted from when she was 8, and then she sort of taught me how to sew, and my cousin to knit, and it was just something we got passed down onto us. And yeah, like I lost it for a long period of time, but now like since COVID and everything, I've gone back to it, and I have like knitting. I get like the stamped packs. So like I've all these different knitting, like sewing and stuff all over the house, like packs of things that I'll do, and it's good because like I don't get to read in peace in hospital, so I might take in the sewing kit and my laptop so I can write, I can watch
mm,
stuff, and I can sew, and it's it's really good. And I like that, and it gives me that kind of way to just get out of my own head, especially in
yeah
hospital, because you know what it's like. It's just you
yeah
don't get
yeah.
any peace or privacy. So, yeah, that's my go to stuff. So, I myself have idiopathic rheumatoid arthritis that makes me slow down and appreciate the day. What makes you slow down and smell the roses?
I think I'm quite an introspective person anyway. I am quite a sort of slow moving person. I think I was just born that way. I think it's been more so since I got long COVID because the fatigue makes me slow down even more.
Yeah,
Um, but I've always,
yeah,
I don't know, I've always had an appreciation for slow days, particularly just enjoying like the moment. I think for me,
yeah,
my favorite thing to do growing up would be when you go on holiday and you go in a pool, or the sea, and you're in a body of water, and you just
yeah,
have that moment of like feeling at peace and feeling that moment of like quiet. And so I always try and like
yeah,
emulate that, I guess, in other parts of my life. I'm not necessarily always very good at it,
yeah,
but I definitely and the other thing as well is for many years. So last year, the week I had COVID, actually, I lost my cat, my childhood cat, and he
oh
was
no,
and it was the worst week of my life, I swear to God. He was 17 and a half, so
yeah,
he was elderly and he had, a lot of health problems in the last couple of years of his life. But he was the most like needy, cuddly cat of any animal I've ever met in my whole life. He was amazing. And I always had a rule with
yeah,
him, which is a rule that I have for all of my pets, but especially for him, which was if he wanted a cuddle, didn't matter what I was doing, unless stopping what I was doing was life threatening, or if I was, doing something very, very important, I would stop what I was doing and give him a cuddle, but he really liked to cuddle. So I spent a lot of
Yeah.
time just with a cat in my arms. And you know what it's like. If you're holding a cat and you can't get to your phone and
Yep.
you're not near a computer, there's not really a whole lot you can do. You just have to sit there and enjoy it. And so I got
Yeah.
very good at like being in that moment with him on my lap, just relaxing and enjoying it. And I don't get it so much now because my Maine Coons are a little bit more energetic at the moment because they're still very young. But I think
Yep.
it's definitely something that
Oh,
that
give
made
it a
me
year
slow
or two.
down.
Give it a year or two.
I'm
Yep.
hopeful. I'm very
I'm
hopeful.
I've got a 6-year-old, well, I think he's about 6 now, who's currently sitting staring at me as if to say, "Hey mama, don't forget about me, lunch is due soon."
Yeah.
So yeah, I know exactly what you're meaning. He's blinking at me and everything. So yeah, no, I get that. So where's your favorite place during the day to curl up? Is it your garden, conservatory, reader's nook? Where do you like to go?
I'm one of those people where I like to sit in different places or be in different places depending on my mood and like what I'm reading. So if we're talking specifically for
Mm-hmm.
reading, I am a big fan of if it's sunny outside, I'll go and sit in the garden. We've got a fountain in the garden, which is lovely, and it's got that kind of like very peaceful element. But I
Yeah.
do like to have the ability to move around. We've got a garden room, which my mum decorated beautifully, and I like to go and sit in there sometimes as well. But I'm very much like I fancy going and sitting in the park today, or I fancy taking a book to the pub, or I fancy this, I fancy that, and then I'll go through phases where actually I don't want to leave like my house. I just want to be at home.
Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah, no, I've been there. I've done that quite a lot. But since COVID, because I'm high risk, I
Mm-hmm.
have spent more and more time at home because it's either being
Yeah.
going, being at home writing and stuff, or it's been at the hospital getting treatment. So I kind of feel like a weird ping pong ball going back and forth. But even though technically now the high risk list's been deleted, I am still told to act like I'm high risk. So I haven't gotten to that stage where they've said, yeah, you can chill.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I have to just sort of break up my day and move my computer around a little bit so that I can feel as if I'm moving, but I'm not really moving. And it's kind
Yes.
of, yeah. So I
Yeah,
get
I'm
I
fully
get where
with you
you're
there.
coming from in that regard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So
I do the same thing
now
when I'm
into the
writing, so
word game.
hey.
This'll be fun. Honestly, I promise. So either you can have a word association or a book. So you never know what people are going to say with this. So we're just going to go for it and see what happens and have some fun with this. First word is trees.
Uh For the Wolf by Hannah Witten.
Oh, okay. Okay, I like that. What about flowers?
The first thing that comes to mind would be the short story Rappaccini's Daughter, by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I always think about that.
Oh, okay. Okay. You've got this down. How about
Books at my brain.
grass?
For grass, I think I've just reread Wideacre by Philippa Gregory, so I'm gonna go with Wideacre.
Okay, I like that. Pink sky.
This one is hard, but I think I'm thinking I've just read Family of Liars by E. Lockhart, and it's really funny because the Waterstones version has got a pink sprayed edge. So like it's like the summer sky and then the pink edge.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, go with that one. I
I'm
like
gonna go with
that.
that one.
White, yeah, white fluffy clouds.
Oh, I know. Midnight in Everwood, which I read last year, which is a retelling of the
Ah,
Nutcracker. So good.
okay. Yeah, I like that. Last one, sunset.
I think this is the hardest
Now
one,
this one.
but
Do you want me to give you like a little? I'll give you one. I'll give you an option.
Yeah, give me
When
an
I
option.
wrote down sunset, I thought of Interview with a Vampire by
Oh, this is
Anne
good.
Rice because they always
Yeah,
used to look out for the sunset. And I don't know
yeah,
why that stuck out in my mind, but yeah, like I always remember that even in the movie they have them watching, the sunset
the
to
sunset.
so they know when they can come out. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's just a weird kind of thing that popped up in my head.
I don't know why. The first thing that came into my head when I was listening to you just then was a book that I was reading at sunset and having that really vivid memory, which would have
Ah,
been Wicked by Gregory Maguire.
yeah, go for that.
I'm gonna go for that
You've
one.
heard one of mine anyway, so yeah.
Yeah.
Did you figure out the theme I gave you? Because
I
I get a
mean,
theme every time I do a writer. I get a theme, and yours was sort of like an English evening in the garden as the
I
sun's
love it.
setting.
I
So
love
that
that so
was your
much.
theme when I was putting your word thing together. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've
Thank you
loved
so
it.
much for
I
having
mean, we've
me.
done an hour and a half. I've loved it, and it's been a quick hour and a half, I must admit. But can we have you back? Will you come back when you've got a new book?
Yeah, absolutely. I should have something out hopefully next year. I'm not sure when yet, but
Then
hopefully
that's
next year.
perfect. We'll have you back next year because I've definitely enjoyed having you on. Definitely enjoyed talking to you. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Now next week, guys, we've got an actual scientist writer coming on the show. So I'm going out of my comfort zone with this one. So we should be you should be interested to see how it goes. And it's a great one for November because I think science is super important in your exam time. So make sure you stop by to check that out. And it's been a pleasure, Francis. And I hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.